The first time I saw the old farmhouse, with its weathered walls and creaky wooden porch, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. City life had become too much, too loud, too fast. I needed an escape, a place to find myself again. That's why when I learned I'd inherited this remote property from a great uncle I barely remembered, it seemed like fate. The house sat in the middle of vast fields that stretched to the horizon, a sea of green and gold. It was a picturesque, tranquil sight. Yet, there was one thing that unsettled me from the start: an old scarecrow, standing solemnly in the field. It was typical, made of straw and old clothes, but there was something about its crooked stance, and the way it faced the house that gave me an eerie feeling. I pushed the thought aside, attributing my unease to the newness of rural life. I decided to focus on settling in, telling myself I'd get used to the silence, the isolation, and yes, even the scarecrow. The first few days passed uneventfully as I busied myself with unpacking and exploring the property. But then, something strange started happening. Each morning, as I sipped my coffee on the porch, I couldn't shake the feeling that the scarecrow was closer to the house than it had been the day before. I laughed at myself for even entertaining such a ridiculous thought. It was probably just my imagination, or maybe local kids moving it for a laugh. Still, I couldn't deny the growing sense of unease. Each day, the scarecrow's new position seemed undeniably closer. One evening, unable to contain my curiosity, I walked out to the scarecrow. Up close, it was even more unsettling. Its face, a burlap sack with button eyes and a stitched smile, seemed almost mocking under the moonlit sky. I examined it for any sign of tampering, but found nothing. Shaking my head, I returned to the house, telling myself it was all in my mind. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. In the following days, my unease turned to paranoia. Each morning confirmed my worst fears: the scarecrow was moving closer to the house. I couldn't understand how or why, but I couldn't deny what I was seeing. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I inspected the scarecrow during the day, searching for any clue that might explain the mystery. But it was just an ordinary scarecrow, lifeless and still. One afternoon, I decided to visit the nearest neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly lady who had lived in the area her whole life. Over a cup of tea, I cautiously brought up the scarecrow. Her reaction was immediate and chilling. She told me a legend about a scarecrow that was said to protect the land, but at a terrible cost. It was a story passed down through generations, one she admitted she never fully believed. That night, things took a turn for the worse. I was jolted awake by the sound of rustling outside my window. Heart pounding, I peered out, but it was too dark to see anything. The next morning, I found footprints in the dirt around the house. They were spaced far apart, as if whatever made them was taking large lurching steps. The scarecrow was now unsettlingly close to the house, its button eyes seeming to stare directly at me. The night the scarecrow appeared at my window was the worst of my life. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within me as thunder roared and lightning illuminated the room intermittently. There it was, pressed against the glass, its burlap face grotesque and menacing in the flickering light. In a desperate search for answers, I rummaged through old boxes and papers left in the attic by my great-uncle. What I found chilled me to the bone: newspaper clippings and journal entries about mysterious disappearances in the area, all dating back decades. The last entry spoke of the scarecrow, warning of its sinister nature. With dawning horror, I realized I had to destroy the scarecrow. It was the source of the terror, the key to ending this nightmare. But as I prepared to face it, the scarecrow vanished. I scoured the fields in the pouring rain, but it was nowhere to be found. That night, the house itself turned against me. Doors slammed shut on their own, windows rattled violently, and I heard whispers in the dark corners of the rooms. I was trapped, haunted by an unseen force. The final encounter with the scarecrow happened on what I swore would be my last night in that cursed house. It was in the hallway, standing at the end of the corridor, lit by the flickering lights. Its stitched smile seemed whiter, more sinister. I couldn't move, paralyzed by fear as it began to lurch towards me, straw fingers reaching out. In that moment, a primal instinct took over. I lunged forward, grabbing a nearby fireplace poker. The scarecrow, surprisingly strong, fought back, its straw limbs flailing wildly. The struggle was surreal, like wrestling a nightmare into submission. Finally, with a desperate effort, I managed to set it ablaze using the fireplace. It burned rapidly, filling the house with the acrid smell of smoke. The next thing I remember was running out into the night, watching from a distance as the flames consumed the scarecrow. The house remained untouched, as if the fire was unnaturally contained to just eradicate my tormentor. Exhausted and traumatized, I left the farmhouse behind that night. I didn't look back, not even once. The city, with all its noise and chaos, suddenly seemed like a sanctuary. The story of the creeping scarecrow remains with me, a haunting memory that I can't quite shake. I heard that the farmhouse was put up for sale again, and sometimes I wonder about the new residents, about whether the scarecrow was truly gone, or just waiting in the fields for its next victim. And so, the legend continues. Each time I close my eyes, I see those button eyes and that stitched smile, and I know that some horrors are too real to be dismissed as just a scarecrow in a field.